Hello friends, hi, this is Anand, and in this short video we'll talk about how to do successful business in Japan with like for your venture and with whatever resources that you have. Now, as you would know, penetrating or doing business in Japan is not that easy. Many companies have tried, they were not able to successful, and most of the times what happens is that people start thinking that doing business with Japan is difficult, but it is not. And this is what we are going to talk about. I have been in Japan for almost 20 years, so I'm going to share some of my key learnings along with some insights that were shared by Mr. Ashish Jejurkar, who conducted one very interesting session in our office in Pune. The session's name was Getting Ready to Do Business with Japan through M&A and Partnerships. So I'm going to share some of the learnings that we discussed over there, along with some of my reflections, my thoughts, on doing business with Japan. First of all, let's try to cover why doing business in Japan is so important. So Japan is third largest by GDP, right? That's very important. Second is per capita income, right? It's also somewhere around 35,000 US dollars. So that is also something a really great indicator. And third part, right, which is human development index, is very high, right, in Japan. So it's very important that we understand Japan is a very important market. Now there are certain challenges also which can be an opportunity for all of us, and we should try to explore and expand and see, right, what we can do to fill that gap. So as you would know, the population is declining, so a lot of challenges are happening just because of the population is going down. So there is really a great amount of opportunity where if you are trying to enter into Japan, find out the companies where that will be impacted by the declining population. Now there is also one more thing that was mentioned by Mr. Ashish Jejurkar, where he said that many companies are dying because of the lack of succession, right? So that is also something important to consider. Labor cost is very high over there, so that is also something that you have to look into. But very important part over there, it's a high tech country, right? They are extremely efficient. We should learn, the way they work, right, is very focused. So there are a lot of good things also that we should try to see before or understand before you do the business. So one very important part, right, wherever you go, whoever you work with, it's very important to understand the mindset. तो हम ना mindset के बारे में जानेंगे इस वीडियो में. तो what is, first of all, understand, right, the type of the nature the Japanese people have, and how basically they have been doing business, so that you'll try to understand. So I would highly recommend, if you're planning to do business with Japan, understand their culture, understand the language. And many times we feel that a language, right, unless you are able to speak, right, fluent Japanese, you won't be able to do business in Japan. That's that will help you do business very easily, but that's not true. There are many individuals who can speak Japanese, but they are learning the culture, right, by talking to them, understanding them, and creating systems, creating ways to ensure that they are creating this bilingual workforce and entering into Japan market. So very important part is understand, right, what is the general mindset, and then try to, right, create systems around them. So some of the key things, right, that I feel about Japan, right, is which are different are, first is the decision making is relatively slow in Japan, compared to other countries, and there is a reason for it. So it's generally in Japan, Japanese companies, and this is again not for all the companies, but many companies, right, they do this group decision, right, and ringy or circular decision making, which basically takes a lot of time. And there are times when you feel that frustrated. मैं एक example देता हूँ. हमें एक काम मिला था 2016 में, and I asked, right, what would be the start date. That was 2016, perhaps January or February, and they told me that this product, we are thinking of getting this product, having your services or having collaboration with you in some time Q3 of 2018. Now imagine, right, 2.5 years ahead. There is no way, right, any startup, right, will be able to, especially, right, startups who are, right, in early stage, would be able to predict even 1 year ahead of the what they are doing. But interesting part that I will tell you, now that I had been working with Japan, I knew that if they have planned, they are going to create this, right, within their system. So what happened in 2018 third quarter, we got the work, and we have been working with them, right, forever. So from that, it's not forever, from that time onwards, I mean, we have started, right, like working with them. So it's very important to understand that once they decide, once they give you the time, I mean, they will start actually working, right, like with you, and they will abide by. I mean, it's like a kind of an annuity. The work will just go on. I mean, as long as you have right intentions and you're showing the sincere efforts, right, like to work on that specific project. The second important part is that they want to avoid, right, like any uncertainty. I mean, now that, like, I mean, they have a lot of uncertainty, they have to face a lot of uncertainties with tsunami or earthquakes. They are fine with that, but human made, right, like uncertainties, it's something that they really want to avoid. So they will make extra efforts, right, like especially in due diligence, understanding you, right, like, I mean, building that trust. It may take some time, but they always want to avoid, right, like uncertainties. Now, like one more very important part, right, like when you are talking to them, when you are having a conversation, it's very important to understand that they may not ask you a lot of questions. They will not ask you questions. And sometimes, right, like when you would feel that, अरे मैंने तो बहुत चीजें बताई, but I mean, I'm not able to get the good I mean, the response from them. But it's not that, right, like they will just not ask questions. And it's very also important to note, many times you have to specifically tell them, give them the context. Whatever the written communication is going to be very important. They call this ho ren so, right, like which is hokoku, right, like, I mean, which is something reporting, renraku, right, like which is contact, and so is sodan, which is discussion. So it's very important that, like, you follow, right, like a proper protocol to have a proper communication with them, understand with them. But things will not move fast. Don't, right, like be impatient. I mean, if you show your impatience, right, like, I mean, it's highly likely that it may impact, right, like your work. So one more point, and this is something applicable for everyone, right, like, I mean, modesty is the key. And I mean, you will find that, like, in Japan quite a lot. I mean, I've seen many senior people, very high level people. I mean, they will work as if, right, like they are normal employees, and this is something that we all should learn, right, like from them. And what I've seen that, like, many people are modest, and you being modest and trying to work with them is like, in that way, is going to be very important. Now, one more part that I've seen is that they think long term, right, like, I mean, it's always it's not, right, like, I mean, right away, right, like a J curve growth, right, like where, of course, if you get that growth, that's good. But most important part, right, like working with them, is to have a long term mindset. I mean, not, right, like just creating something for a month or two. I mean, it's basically long term process, and be part of that long term process as well. Then I mean, one thing that I've seen that, like, I mean, there are times, right, like when you are going to get delayed, or there are mistakes, right, like, or there are some challenges that happens. Just communicate openly, right, like with senior managements over there. And this is again, right, like true with all the other countries as well. I mean, managing expectations, managing communication is going to be super important. And look, I mean, anytime when you do, right, like any business with other person, the clapping will happen with both the hands, right, like, so it's very important that you are also opened up, you also set the expectation for others, that so मैं जब करता हूँ business, तो मैं ऐसे कह देता हूँ कि देखो, I mean, as a businessman, right, like, I mean, we would, I mean, as we are doing business with Japan, we will learn, right, like, I mean, we'll sincerely learn their culture, we'll try to understand their language. But at the same time, they should also understand the culture in India, culture surrounding situations, so that they will also be able to get, right, like why there are sometimes challenges, why some people are taking days off, why people are getting late. There are, right, like certain systemic challenges as well, right, like traffic is very heavy, right, like especially, and it's uncertain as well. So once you also share, right, like, I mean, the challenges openly with them, the communication, the bond, right, like would be very strong. So ensure that, like, you are going to do that, right, like when you're doing with business with Japan. Now, one very important part is that they will never say no, right, like, so like on your face, right, like, I mean, many times again, right, like we share this in our one of the previous videos, where failing happily, I mean, once you have a discussion with them, you will feel that, like, okay, I've cracked it, or they were happy, and perhaps, right, like, I mean, the deal will go on, and we are, right, like failing happily as well, right, like over there, where we feel that we'll get the project. But many times, you have to understand the indications also from them. When they will say that, I will need to check, I mean, it is highly likely that they are going to not going to go ahead. So try to understand some of such aspects as well, and as you start doing business with Japan, perhaps you'll be able to understand. And now, these are, right, like some of the pointers that I felt, right, like you should know. I'm sure, right, like there would be a lot of other pointers as well. Would love to hear them in the comment section. Please feel free to share this also with people who are doing business in Japan. I'm happy to answer if you have any specific question. Please reach out to us on Get Funded Easily, info@getfundedeasily.com, and we'll try to get in touch with you. So we have created this Get Funded Easily as a initiative where we really want to ensure that the funding part, especially funding part for the startup, is easy. We have also connected very well, right, like to a lot of Japanese companies. So would love to see if there are any opportunities where we can do business together by helping you with any funding or business related opportunities. So with that note, I would like to stop here. Happy to hear from you, and look forward to staying in touch with you through this YouTube channel. Thank you.